Number 10 video. That's what we're going to do today is go over the final video in this series where we talk about how to create languages. In this lesson, we're going to mostly stay on how to seamlessly integrating your construct language, the conlang, into your story. Mostly because we want to help enhance the experience of the language. Because if it's just made for making a language for sakes, it doesn't really have substance to it, right? So but we're gonna do how to seamlessly weave con languages into your story. But Thomas, how does integration matter? Or why does integration matter? Well, construction language, whether it's artistically developed or engineered, can be a compelling tool. Why? Because storytelling is all about what you bring to it and the depth to that storytelling. Narrative can become very boring when things are just happening because they're happening, or when things are just there to be there and there's no truth to it, no depth to it. So the primary role of all elements that we add, from character development to world building to even plot, feel better when they feel lived in, or have history, or even work fluidly and naturally, and don't feel like it's just put in there. You don't want to just be like, yes, this crackle is actually designed for calling people. It's called a crackle crews are great. Only the wealthy have crews, and the oppressed don't. So crews, crews. So the crews, and let's be honest, that isn't interesting. So when you actually put some time into it, and you put some thoughtful effort, the language takes on a life its own, and it feels natural. That's the secret: is natural integration, and that's true with anything. Plot, when it's just like it just feels forced. When themes are being preached at, it feels annoying and not casual. Seating, having multiple point of views on all things makes stuff feel real and allows us as readers to intake the information without feeling like it's just being like out of nowhere, like, hey, I'm just here because you need to know about this thing, and this is my POV in real life, but I wanted to put in my book. It's the same thing with languages. When languages sort of just kind of like go there just because it's like, I have a language and here it is, it feels out of place. But if you allow it to move through the narrative truth of characters and purpose, then it works. I'll put it this way. If let's say you spoke Italian, okay, and no one else did, okay, and just randomly you just used Italian while talking to people who don't speak Italian, just because you can speak Italian, um, you're a douche. And that's what it feels like. It's just out of nowhere. It's just, you're just talking about, yeah, so anyway, I was at the baseball game and, Eureka, you know? Or it's like when people use big words, you're just like, that was out of nowhere. Yes, but I know this big word. I understand, okay. I get it. I get it. But, communication is about understanding your audience. And, if I could break down the process of destroying an atom, whatever, 2 from 4 to 5, whatever it is, which I don't understand the process. But if I did, and I just start talking about that to people who not only don't care about the atom, but have no interest in that topic, I sound stupid because like I'm out of place. I'm not. What am I doing? So language is the same thing. So you want language to have a place and a purpose within the conversation, even within the narrative. Anyway, on the other hand, if a writer does overuse the con language or fails to provide significant context, it can alienate the audience. It makes them feel like, what's going on? Why am I even here? And it's all about creating a balance and ensuring that the language is explained without having to do exposition. We've talked about this in other videos within this series, For example, if someone says "hoofla," right, and raises their hand, and someone else says, "Oh, good morning to you as well," you know what "hoofla" means. It's some sort of greeting, right? Whatever the case may be. Or if someone says, "Are you in or are you not in?" Iced. All right, excellent. We're glad to have you aboard. So we now know iced means hello. Yes, iced. Anyway. But Thomas, how much language should I include? That's up to you, really. But the key to a successful integration is always going to be about the narrative. How does it enhance the narrative? Now, remember, all narratives are made up of plot and story. Plot is what needs to happen no matter what, and story is how it unfolds through the emotional experience of characters and their choices. So, if the language is through the story, the characters, and it moves the plot along, now it is it's logically narrative and poignant. It has purpose. You want to consider what is the integration's purpose. It needs to serve a function. It needs to reveal something, either plot, world, or character. It needs to reveal depth. It has to have a truth to it. It can't just be somebody walking around and just out of nowhere go konnichiwa, and you're like, none of us speak Japanese. What does that mean? You're like, you don't know, and then you talk to people like this. How do you not know what konnichiwa means? You know, uh, uh you know, it happens. But each use of the language really, in essence, should elevate the story, right? Because the more it elevates the story and the more it feels naturally integrated, it will immerse the readers more. It will feel like they are a part of the experience and not like put off for a second where they're just like, what was that? That was weird. So instead of sort of like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could put a new language in this moment, think about how instead of adding it to text and overwhelming that text, or dialogue, I should say, think about the strategy of it. What is the strategical purpose of adding this language in this moment, and how can I make it feel like a natural part of the conversation? Okay. So again, we're going to talk about a couple things that help you with the actual integration. All right. These are 3 techniques for translation in the narrative without actually have to explain some things. So a contextual translation, I kind of just did that a second ago, but this is ultimately where the con language, the meaning is inferred, right? Without disrupting the narrative. You don't have to stop it and be like, but by the way, they've said this. So rather than providing a direct explanation, the text around it, the copy, the verbiage around it, or the character's actions will clarify the meaning of a language. This is a good technique, all right. And for example, if someone was uh, like for example, what just happened there? If I did this, all right, da-da-da, like uh Dore, right? And the warrior shouted, thrusting his blade skyward. The crowd echoed the chant, "Victory!" in the old tongue. So this Dore means victory, right? Dore, the warrior shouted, thrusting his blade skyward. The crowd echoing the chant, "Victory!" in the old tongue. Very simple. All right. Oh, I'll just leave it up there for a second. So Dore is not explicitly translated within the dialogue itself. It's not like they said, "Dore, my friends, victory," as I said in the old language. No, it's a phrase that becomes clear with the accompanying explanation. Love that M dash. The chant and its repetition create an emotional impact as well. So it has movement with it. Obviously, doesn't have like, oh my god, this was so, because it's just an example. But if this was put into the larger context and we were seeing our characters finally at that moment where they win the big fight, this would have a little bit more impact, but it adds to the narrative truth. Of course, there's always what do we call direct translation and dialogue, okay? Direct translation and dialogue. Okay. So this involves pairing a con language phrase with an immediate explanation, either in dialogue tag or a following sentence. This approach does help with clarity and accessibility for readers that sort of just say, I want it to be explained. For example, Varek lu taha, she said, her tone soft. Peace to you and yours. So obviously, I read that harsh, but if I was a Varek lu taha, she said, her tone soft. Peace to you and yours. Okay. In this situation, Varek lu tae, tae, is directly translated, offering readers, right, that clear moment of understanding. But it also helps that the tone is in, her tone is soft. Her tone soft. All right, so we understand that this is a pretty mild moment. Okay, all right. Now this one is usually my favorite. I love implied. I'm not really a person that just likes to kind of sort of be like, "Hey, this is exactly what it is." But you know, I like the reader to feel like they're in on it. I like the reader to kind of discover it. And apply meaning, this is the inferred element. This leaves the language untranslated, and it relies solely on your ability to move the narrative, the the narrative in a way that allows the reader to understand the inference. So this also adds a little bit, like what's going on, So example would be the mage whispered an incantation, Zarath, K, Null, and the air shimmered with power. And that basically, we don't need to translate it, but we know that whatever they said ignited the power of magic, and boom, the magic has been lifted. And what I like about this is that this particular technique, again, gets the reader involved. It encourages them to sort of think and engage with the scene. Because remember, when you seed, when you foreshadow, when you don't explain everything right away, if a phrase comes up like, "Oh yes, the palpable, the palpable are coming this, on the new, in a fortnight," as George R. R. Martin might say. If you don't explain what a palpitol is, it allows the reader to be like, "Oh, what is that?" And then eventually you tell them by seeding and giving a little bit more information. But once they arrive, now you're showing. So it's really good for creating curiosity and creating momentum for the reader going, "Oh, I feel like I'm a part of this." Okay. 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 Anyway. All right, I guess I'll just do this one really quick. So, weaving language into the narrative, immersion. Let's be honest. Immersion is so important when it comes to reading because you want the reader to move through the narrative with the characters, okay? That's ultimately what immersion is, okay? They feel like they are there. So if you allow cons to be woven into the fabric of your narrative, right? And it creates a vivid scene that establishes place and culture. Remember, if the new language is presented in a way that is naturally woven through the narrative and isn't just like somebody speaking Japanese to a group of people who probably don't know Japan even exists, because they just are completely away from the world and books. It's weird. It's off, right? But you want to allow descriptions and rituals and ceremonies and opportunities to showcase your language in a way that is a part of the system, where it grounds the truth of the language and its use instead of it just being, well, this language exists. I made it up. Look at it. Woo, look at the pretty letters, because it's the same thing as like crazy names in fantasy, when it doesn't matter if it's fantasy, thriller, whatever it does, but it's usually like words where you're just like names, you just get to them and there's a bunch of letters and you're just like, blah, 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 blah. No one's trying to pronounce that. They're just going to be like, and as they grabbed each other and collapsed into one another's arms, they finally kissed and blah, 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 blah. Confessed his love to the woman of his soul, madam. So you want language to also not feel like random names like that. You want it to flow in a way that the reader can still make sense of it, even if it's with an air of mystery. Let's see. Oh, I have an example. Let's do this. Do, 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 do. The villagers gathered in the square, singing the ancient hymn, Leora Palanaira. Their voices rising with the dawn. Okay, basically, it's just integrated into the scene and it's emphasizing solely culture. It's allowing the moment to breathe, and we don't really need to know what the word means, but it adds value to the behavior of the village, the community itself, and that becomes world building. But it also adds something a little bit more because this would be an example. Let's say we were in Japan, we didn't know the language, and they were doing, let's say it's the first time you see them doing a specific movement in the streets, but as a community, they're all getting up there, maybe they're doing whatever, and they start singing, or maybe you go to the Buddha temple and you see them doing something. It's the first time you never even heard the word Buddha, and you see them doing this and whatever, and that's what it becomes. So it's more of an experience of the culture and not necessarily a need to understand the culture. And there's a big difference between somebody, again, speaking Japanese, like in the Midwest, in a small town that has a school with 300 students in it. Like it would be so out of place, right? Especially if it was me going konnichiwa, you know, or whatever. Oreo de gato, Mr. Roboto. All right, so, but in this, again, this is just to emphasize culture. It's world building. It doesn't have to be explained, all right? But we also get some explanation. The village is gathered in the square, singing the ancient hymn. So we know it's an ancient hymn, and they're gathering. Their voices rising with the dawn. So this is a part of process. All right. The other thing you want to keep in mind, okay, is conveying the cultural nuances. Remember, language in its essence comes from somewhere that has been created by people and a group and a community and an ever evolving community itself. So languages are going to, without a doubt, reflect something from values to beliefs to even social structure and its speakers. The fluidity of the language or the aggressiveness of the language will be presented through the behavior of its people. And when you figure out what the relationships are and how the language evolved and how they utilize it, it'll create something stronger for you. As an example, um, when, let's say, you have a character or characters, okay, and they can speak both the common tongue and maybe their own language, and and when I say common, I mean maybe they came from. Oh no, let's do it the other way. You, as a character, went to this other region, and in that region, they were speaking their native tongue, right? And this character who's going there doesn't actually speak their native tongue. However, this community also speaks the native tongue of the character who's visiting. Why do I say that? Because out of respect to their culture, they continue to speak their language, even though they can speak um, the other language. However, in private, when it's just a one, two, or three people with this other person, they will speak in the other language. They'll speak in the character's language that is in the village. Uh, this would just be an example of allowing it to be confusing for that character where they don't know what's going on and they're like, I don't understand what you're saying, I can't. And the other people are just so committed to their beliefs and their style and the respect to their language that they will not conform to it publicly, but in private they'll be able to speak to you, that character, in your tongue. But they'll insist that you start learning their language so they can communicate with you in public. So that's the important part about conveying cultural nuance. It's little things like that. Um, Another thing where, like, I kind of actually hate this trope whenever somebody like a gaijin or something, a non-Japanese person goes to Japan, and it happened to miss the baseball. It happened in the Wolverine. It happens in like every not Japanese person goes to Japan, and they have like a bowl of rice, and they stick the chopsticks in the bowl of rice, and then they're like, "Oh, you can't do that. It's superstitious." It is superstitious. It is bad luck. It is a Japanese thing, but it's like always the thing that you see. Well, they're not Japanese, so they wouldn't know. So they do this thing, and you're like, okay, but that is an example of cultural nuance, right? And maybe in that situation, if it was like you're writing a world and somebody does something with the food, or like, maybe they don't kneel down, they stand when they eat. Well, the cultural nuance would be like, no, you have to sit down. You can't stand. And then it'd be like, why? And then maybe they say the word for whatever, like eating on your knees is a form of bowing. So they might, it's the dasinanamara, right? Dasinanamara, right? Which doesn't mean anything. I'm just making up sounds. Dasinanamara, right? And they're like, oh, all right. And it's like, why? And it's like, well, it's our way of praying while we eat. We're thankful that food is provided to us. So it's dasinanamara practice. And they're like, oh, okay. And that is like a way to convey cultural nuance. It's a small little moment of, adding to it. But also, it's okay to create some mystery and atmosphere. So you could use the language judiciously. Don't overuse it. Don't underuse it. But um, so, but like, you could have it where maybe, let's say you are writing a fantasy book and they go into a tomb and they're exploring a dungeon or whatever. And on the wall it says, Kotara Matare Savada, right? And I just made all that sound up. Kotaras Matara Baba. And someone and then the character in the book is like, this is a dead language. No one has spoken it in thousands of years. Well, how do you know it's a dead language? Because I don't know it, but it is from our forefathers. And now you don't have to explain it. But now there's a woo, and then maybe they go, but Daratas, right? Or Drendres. Maybe one of the words, he goes, this sounds very similar to, Dandras. And they'll be like, what's that mean? And they're like, well, Dandras means to die, or death. And they're like, oh, but they could be wrong though, because it's an older language. So now you're creating, tension, and you're creating stakes. Well, not stakes, but tension. And you're allowing the language again to move the narrative. So mystery and atmosphere is also good too. Final thoughts on this video. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. Creating a con language is as much a journey as discovering it in real life. Creating the language is going to be a massive endeavor if you so choose it, or it could be something that's subtle and pops in here and there. Remember, there is engineering and then there's artistic. And honestly, you can do whatever you want. If you're not creating a language that's going to be utilized in the world and needs strict rules, and an entire population of real people will have to learn this language with books, you can literally make up every word. And if somebody says something like, hi, how are you, in the novel, you can literally have them say, ufra makatare, or undare sunapoto, right? And that's all made up. I just made up all those. That's all fake sounds. And that's how easy language can be. However, I'd write those words down and maybe that phrase. Now, this is the other really nice part. And we've talked about this in other videos. A phrase might be compiled of words that are different than the words themselves, because sometimes a phrase might have a different pronunciation than, say, a words by itself. And a phrase might be pronounced a certain way, but words by themselves might be pronounced a certain different way. So you have that kind of freedom too. Have a great day, or on your journey, many great days, right? And then but each of those words could be different words. So you have that kind of freedom. You are not in a box. You can do what you want. It's all about keeping track of it, though. That's why the sheet that's available for free in the folder. There's an area for phrases, and there's also an area for your vocabulary, in a sense. And that's all it is. It's just building your vocabulary and creating the language. Sometimes it's just as simple as coming up with sounds and words as needed, whatever the case may be. I really like kind of building words though, and I really love the language process. And one of my favorite things to do though is to kind of take a sound, uthra, uthra, and then figure out how that would that phonetically be spelled, without using like the phonetic language, the lettering, because that gets me. But I'll just be like uthra, right? Uthra. All right, uthra, thra, thra, right? Okay, and then I start figuring it out. But then I'm like, how does that sound next to other words that I created? Uthra mumatre sumpahanre. And I'm like, oh, that kind of has a fluidness to it. Or maybe I want it to be a little, uthrano mahate, right? Whatever the case may be. And I'm like, oh, that all sounds good. And that means this thing, right? And now I'm like, oh, well, I have words then. Uthra, untrano, right? Blessed be, right? Utrano, right? Again, these are fake. It probably has a little Italian to it because I speak Italian. But Utrano, right? Utrano, right? Utrano might mean blessed be, right? And now I got blessed be is pronounced Utrano, right? But that doesn't mean the word blessed is Uthra and ano is be. However, it can be. I could be like, oh, I just made up two words now. You have that freedom, and that's how I do it. I just come up with sounds and ideas and phrasings, and then I take that to start, and then I start developing the vocabulary, and then I start developing the grammar and the translations and the sounds, just how I did on this video series, where it's all about the phonology and all these other things and figuring out what the sounds of your letters are, and then you take it from there. So I would say don't be afraid, or I should say be confident enough to experiment, to revise, and to think outside the box. Con languages are not beholden by any rules other than the ones you create. They're meant to evolve alongside your story, to allow the narrative to feel full and give purpose to your plot. If something doesn't feel right, you do have the freedom to change it. After all, it is made up. So I would say through this process, you're not just building a language, you're crafting an experience for your readers and discovering your own strengths as a writer to really dive deep into the unknown, because it's fake language, it's made up. So, I hope you could take what you learned in these 10 videos, establish a language of your own, and really add some value to your narratives. With that said, next video in this series, like I said, this was 10 videos by itself. So I want to thank you for joining me on this journey as we went through creating a language and the foundations of that language. With these tools, hopefully you'll be able to write out a craft, write out a language. However, if you have questions, or you want me to build on something, or talk about something that I didn't talk about, let me know in the comments and I will add to it. For now, I am going to take a little break though, while I compile the next 10 videos for this playlist, and I'm going to try and revisit this playlist again in 2026 with another 10 videos that will go a little bit deeper into the process itself. I am thinking I'm either going to do a design a language from scratch, where we break down what we learned from these 10 videos and just create a new language in real time, or I'm going to break down actual languages from fantasy worlds and show you how they may have worked it. I'm probably leaning more towards just designing a language from scratch. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If there's something that you want to see or get out of these videos for creating a language, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to do what I can. As always, I like to do a question in every single video, because why not, right? And my question to you is simply, did this series help you in developing your language? If so, let me know how. If not, and you think there's some more, I'm always up to listen, because it's all about growing. With that said, if you love what you've been hearing on the channel in general and you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. Other than that, that's it. We're done. Keep developing the right mindset. See you next time. Bye.